This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid state turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's at geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Alex Svinov. He is the CEO, co-founder of Insquad, and he's going to be talking to us today a little bit about how to build and keep those remote development teams and to be the good managers that we need to be so that we can keep the people we have and keep them happy and productive and just overall good leadership tactics and skills. Anyway, with all that being said, Alex, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hi, John. Hey, everybody. Happy to be here.
If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background and kind of how you got to where you are today and what is it that you guys are doing?
Yeah, I just guess I should start with my previous career because after I graduated, I had a computer science degree, but then I felt like, I want to do is I'm not the real developer, as many of those guys that are getting computer science degrees. So I went to banking industry and I spent about 10 years in investment banking. And at first it felt great, but then I felt like I know everything. I know where I'm going to be in 5 to 10 years, and just didn't feel like a lot of rewarding. So at the same time, the crisis of 2008 struck, and I had the midlife crisis. So it kind of all kind of pulled together, and I was like, I want to do something in IT. I want to do something real. I want to do something that adds a lot of value to people out there. So I started my first business at the startup, and it was 2014. It took me some time to raise capital and to learn a little bit more about running my own business. And then I felt great. It was a startup in IT doing outsourcing software development, and it was success. And then I started the next business and the next, and it felt like I could do everything. At some point, of course, I had failures, but in 2020, I felt like I was doing my fourth business, and I tried to hire a team of developers quickly, and it was a real pain. I mean, we had a lot of interviews, we had a lot of candidates, but either the candidates would be weak, or they would cost a lot, and they would go to a wealthier competitor. And then I felt like hiring developers shouldn't be like such a big problem, because there's a lot of things that you can automate with the power of internet and computing. And that's what we do at Insquad. We automate the whole process of sourcing and vetting developers so that you could build yourself a team in like under 2 weeks.
So what's that process like for when it comes to automating? And I've struggled with you. I've been there. Back in my last full-time job, I was the manager of a web and mobile development team, and I remember having just a revolving door of developers for a period of time, partly because I was a bad manager. Let's, be obvious about that. But it was very difficult sometimes to get someone in. And by the time I did, the next person was already, going out the door. And it was a challenge to vet people, to get the right candidates coming in, to make sure your job posting is written in a proper way. I mean, there was such a challenge there. How do you guys automate that?
Well, I think that, first of all, I wouldn't say that you necessarily were a bad manager, because this experience, I felt the same exactly in my team. A lot of people would be leaving, and that was the reason for that is the rapidly evolving market. lots of new technologies, lots of new startups, lots of new things to try. And people always, software developers are probably the most curious people in the world, and they will always want to try something new. Having said that, the process of finding and vetting the talent is pretty much a routine that you can automate. First, you can automate finding developers, and in our case, we don't look for developers within the United States or Western countries. We go to Latin America, Eastern Europe, and Asia to search for developers. And in those cases, finding them, it may be a problem if you don't know the local markets, but when you do, it's pretty much a technology. And then vetting is another problem. Obviously, without automation, you have to spend a lot of time on each and every candidate, and you will not necessarily get rewarded for spending that time, because a lot of times you would find somebody on the resume, it's a great senior developer, and in fact, it's not as great senior developer. So what we did is we did a vetting machine that each and every developer goes through a certain number of tests, and that helps us to lower the number of hours that we have to spend in actual interviews with the developers, because still we have to go through a real interview with each and every developer on the platform to make sure that that's a senior developer for the quality that we are able to sell to our clients.
So right now, one of the things that I've seen a lot is that the speed of which people, will get resumes in and interview them, and sometimes before our company can even make a job offer, they've already gotten another role. Are you seeing that the speed of this process is just increasing every day?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I think that there's just when it's a classical case when there's just so much demand chasing so little supply, so that every developer gets at 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 offers a week without ever asking for that. So and this is what we've seen in the last few years, that every developer would constantly be attacked by headhunters, and that's why a lot of them would change the jobs fast, and that's why evaluating developers is a very important task, because because ultimately a lot of technical people in your team or in my team would end up spending time interviewing the developers, and evaluating their technical skills, and then you would see the developer spending 6 or 12 months in your team and then go away. So it's just, when you consider how much time your team actually spends not on developing the product, but on this hiring process, you would see that automation makes a lot of sense. And and that's why we built essentially the product that we built at Insquad.
So are you seeing you mentioned that sometimes developers are getting 4 or 5 offers. Are you seeing that shift now? Because there's been a lot of things in the news about layoffs when it comes to developers at Amazon and Meta and other tech companies that have just recently kind of made the news. Are we seeing that shift a little bit, or is it still really hot for that market?
No, the market has definitely cooled off recent highs in the last 6 months, I would say. Still, if it's a strong developer, if it's a good technical skill, it will always be in demand, and they are still getting a lot of offers. It's probably not as many as they did 6 months ago, but we believe that as the market kind of stabilizes, and I see it is going to happen in the next probably 6 to 12 months. We're probably going to see somewhat similar dynamics, but because there is still, there is 4 million software engineers in the United States, and there is a unfilled demand for 1 million. and it's gonna be like that all the time. So that's
Yeah.
why the only way to compensate for that is to look elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's a good way of putting it. That although it has cooled off, yeah, it's still pretty high, especially when you compare the development position with other positions that are outside of tech.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, have you guys? I know you focus pretty heavily just on development. Is there ever an idea of expanding this into other areas, such as maybe data scientist, or are you already doing that?
Well, actually, we're doing everything that's involved in the process of creating code. So it's
Mm.
the data scientists, DevOps, obviously developers. It,
QA, project
yeah,
managers as well.
yeah, we do have QA and project managers as well, although we don't focus as much on those because they
Mm.
require way more soft skills, and quite often they need to be on site. And that because we only do remote, we are not, probably in some cases we're not the best choice for that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And there's been a shift too with a lot of those resources, such as like project managers, bringing them back into the office instead of being remote. But it seems like the development is still staying very much so remote. Is that because of demand, or just because it's a culture thing?
Well, I think it's two things about remote development. First, uh, the the work of developer does not imply a lot of interaction with other people, because you have your task, you understand how to complete that, and you go and you do it, right? And the last thing you want to do is to sit right next to somebody else who constantly distracts you. So what I've seen before the pandemic, actually, I was not a big fan of remote work, and I had some people on my team, they were like, please let me go remote, please let me go remote. I was like, you know, I would do it, but not as a general policy of the company. However, with the pandemic, everybody had to go remote. And what we've noticed, and we did a lot of research on that, is that efficiency of the developers that wanted to go remote, it actually increased substantially, because then people didn't spend time on traffic, didn't spend time on get distracted, and then ultimately they've developed better code at a faster pace. So I think that software engineering is gonna stay remote for the good. Uh, Having said that, a lot of professions that are nearby, like product management, like design and project management, a lot of times they involve a lot of interaction, a lot of communication with the clients or with other project managers,
Mm.
and that profession is not going to be as much remote as the software engineer. And another point here is that, like I said, there's just not enough software engineers in US, so there's no other way but to go remote or to bring a lot more new software engineers into US, which a lot of people, they don't want to leave their countries. They want to, they're happy where they are. So remote makes a lot of sense of economic wise, so to
Yeah,
speak.
no, I agree 100% with the economy of it, and also when you're looking at, I know for me personally, if I have to drive to a commute to an office, and sometimes there's heavy traffic, sometimes you're taking a train or things like that, that commute time kind of takes out of my day. Whereas when I transition into a remote work, instead of driving, I'm typically sitting at my computer or working, through that same period of time, which gives me more time to be creative and to come up with some kind of solution to a problem or to write better code.
Oh, oh, absolutely. Actually, the first time I tried remote work was in 2001. And I was actually, I had a software engineer that was working remotely, and it was it was so cool. At that time, it was like, wow, can this actually be true? And obviously, at that time, I had no idea that it's all gonna, change the industry so much in 20 years.
Yeah. So shifting gears just a little bit, let's go back to the leadership and management side. If we're managing developers and maybe we have a mixed team, some people remote, some people on site, doesn't really matter. Maybe it's all remote. How can we as leaders be a better manager so that people want to stay, so that they're encouraged to stay and not go looking for that next opportunity?
Well, I think there's it's like managing any kind of team. Remote does not really imply something substantially different. You first and foremost, you have to listen to your team, because a lot of times you would hear from developer, hey, I want to go remote, or I want to stay in the office. And if you have this kind of dialogue, if the developer is open, open to suggest something, you would most certainly accommodate him, and then you would have that person happier and produce better results. That's number one. Number two, there is a big problem with the remote, of feeling as a team, because obviously when you are in the office and you are all you are seeing your mates, and you're kind of feeling your team physically. Obviously, remote doesn't offer this opportunity, and more to that, to add to the complexity, there is time zone, and sometimes there is also cultural differences. So it really, in our team, well, first of all, our team is fully remote. In our team, we practice uh, sometimes some calls when we don't talk about work at all. There is educational call when anybody who is feeling like he read a new book, or he learned something new, or she, they are happy to share that. And there is just a call when anybody can talk about just about anything. So we kind of try to mimic the patterns that we have offline, when people go for lunch together, or they sit for coffee and discuss something that is totally irrelevant to the work, and then you kind of feel more personal touch between the team members, and that helps a lot to make people feel like they're a team. Um, and I think that practicing this kind of routine is very very important in creating the whole feeling of being a team. So if you do that, it kind of helps a lot to keep the people in check.
I think that's a really good thing to do, to try to mimic uh, the concept of kind of that serendipity that you have when you're in the office. Where you bump into somebody, you talk about their kids, you talk about sports, or whatever's going on in the world today. You have those conversations, but it's difficult to do that remotely because you feel like, if I was just going to call you without a scheduled talk, I feel like I would interrupt you, right? Because I don't know what you're doing. I feel like I'm bothering you if I just call you to ask how your day's going, or or what's up with your family. But having those scheduled environments where this call is not going to be where we talk about the projects, we're going to be talking about other things, is a really cool idea.
Yeah, and as for communication, there is a whole set of rules. They're pretty simple and easy to follow. About there's off work hours, when you just cannot set up any meeting or call person, because obviously if they're remote, they can be at home with the family or doing something, and then they cannot pick up the phone and answer. And then there's the rules for how do you communicate, especially which is relevant for a remote locations where there is a big time zone difference. And for example, if you ask somebody a question, then you go to sleep and that person wakes up, and if the question is not, complete in a sense that you need to you're not very clear in what you're asking, or you didn't give enough information, or not didn't give enough context, and then all that person can do is say, hey, you know what, I didn't really understand what you were saying. Do you mean this? And that means that your question is getting answered in 2 days, which makes it pointless. So there are certain rules. How do you work with a remote team, that you try to make your questions fully understandable. It takes a little bit more time, but after, a month or two of practice, anybody can do that. At least we did not see any substantial problems in our team. We've been remote for over 2 years now, and it all works just perfect.
Awesome.
How do you encourage onboarding folks? Like if someone is hiring for the first time, they're a new startup and they want to hire developers. How do you encourage them to onboard those remote employees properly? Because sometimes if you're a remote employee and you start a new job and you're not ever there physically, sometimes you feel like you're kind of forgotten about. So what ideas do you have for properly onboarding someone?
Well, in our business, we are fully responsible for the happiness of a developer when he joins new team. So we are actually in the first months or so, we are actually onboarding developer. First week we have like a daily things, and then we have like an onboarding checklist, talking about things about timing difference, about holidays, about the cultural differences, a lot of these things that pop up when you work with a remote developer from a remote location. Keep in mind we can hire to a team in San Francisco, somebody from Romania or from India or from Malaysia. So a lot of times, things are different at those locations, and there is no other way but to do a checklist. But the checklist is pretty standard. You can easily Google it. There are just not too many things that can come up with, and a lot of companies have gone through this. But because a lot of companies don't think about the developers they hire from a remote location as much as we do. We feel it's our obligation, and that's why we do it ourselves. And then after a month, when the developer is fully on board, and when the communication is established, we kind of step back and let the company work directly with the developer.
And I think that's a really good approach to make sure that the developers engaged and the employers engaged and kind of, carry that relationship on and make sure it's built properly instead of just kind of tossing them out there and hoping they land properly.
Yeah, and I've never seen it working well if you don't have a setup process. And it's really, developers are a very intellectual work, and it's not like you're working in a factory and you can be easily replaced. It's a completely different set. So so it's very important to spend a little bit more time and have that person, get get established in the team.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when it comes to managing remote employees and going through that process of evaluating and making sure that they're, sometimes we have issues when it comes to managers that are micromanaging remote employees because they have this mindset that they feel like if they don't see you, that you're not really working. How do you deal with, your customers that are doing things like that so that you can try to engage them in a more modern sense of validating the work that's being done?
Well, we first of all, we would immediately get a feedback from a developer, because every developer feels when he or she is being micromanaged. Um, and the only way that the way the reason why that happens is that there is a lot of there is a lot of um, you know emotional stress on the part of a customer, or a manager, that the developer is sitting out there doing nothing or not doing something that I expect him to be doing this time. And the we are there obviously to remove that friction, and we all a lot of times would come and say, hey, you've got your Jira or you track or whatever, and you have all the tasks, and everything is recorded there. So just let the person try to do some work, and do it a step by step. First give him a task for one day and see how he has completed. And that's actually the typical process you would do for somebody in the office as well, right? When you hire somebody new, first you give them a small task and see how they do it. Then you give a little bit bigger task, give it a little bit more opportunity to show their responsibility, and then build on the trust that you have with the person, and then get rid of any micromanagement at all, because And what micromanagement does, it gives an extra administrative complexity to both sides, and it never produces any good results. Nobody can create something great or do good code if they are being micromanaged.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think, micromanaging is one of those things where I used to do it too. I was when I first became a manager, I kind of felt like I had to be um, always looking over my team because they were, a reflection of me, kind of thing. And
I
I realized,
I'm sorry. Well, I did it like the first year I did that like every day, and then I was getting annoyed, and I would never get the results I wanted, and I felt that if I'm not at my desk and somebody comes over and I'm not there, oh, that's it. That's the end of the world. But then I got 1 week I got really sick and I couldn't do anything, and couldn't even read my phone. So, and after a week, I came back to the office, you know, things didn't fall apart, and people really did some great work. And at that time, I realized that I'd better not, try to interfere with them at all, as opposed to try to always guide them.
yeah, I found that I basically was the bottleneck for the team. The team couldn't scale because I was the bottleneck, and I kept slowing them down, and they weren't hitting their marks. Not, it was because of me. And once I got out of the way and realized that, what, they're actually fine without me, and they just need me to set guidance and strategy, and let them kind of get out of their way, and remove impediments that are in front of them, and let them do their job. And once I got to that point and I realized that I could trust them, things were so much easier, so much better for me and for them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So what other pieces of advice would you have for let's say team leads that are interested in management? Maybe they're starting a new business or venture and they're hiring developers, or maybe it's their first time going through that. What should they be looking for, and what should they do to help ease this process and this transition?
Well, I think there were two things that I would focus on. Uh, if somebody who is listening to this right now, I would give two pieces of advice. Number one is have a clear goal of where do you want to be, right? Uh, would you want to be a project manager, product manager, a CTO, CEO, entrepreneur? What is something that really drives you? If is it writing code that really drives you, or is it creating something great that really drives you? Because everybody has their own motivation, and keep that in mind, because this is the thing that will help you when you're down and when things don't work the right way. I I like I just had this yellow sticker that I put on my screen, and whenever I would, whenever things would go down, whenever I would not achieve the results that I expected, or something would fall apart, I would, read of that and think about it, and kind of, takes you away from bad thoughts, because whenever you want to become something bigger, you have to take more responsibility, and sometimes you will fail, and that is okay. And this is important, just to acknowledge that you will fail, and that is okay.
Yep.
And that's one thing. And then second thing is that go out and do it. Right? When you've decided, don't don't postpone it for the next quarter or the next year. Don't think about financial obligations or anything, because what our mind plays tricks on us. Essentially, every time we think about, hey, taking a little bit more risk, we're getting scared. Obviously, everybody's getting scared. I get scared even after I started 4 startups. In the fifth, I was like, ooh, it's really scary. uh, uh, and then our mind starts to think about all these little things, the reasons why I should not be doing this, and that's its way to to protect itself from from being scared. But once you start doing something, you kind of get into a totally different mindset, and you stop feeling that that pain all the time, and you kind of start looking at things differently, and that's where and also you start to discover that a lot of things that you were thinking that are too complex or too hard or that require too much money or take a lot of time, they are actually so much easier than you thought. That you get a lot of positive feedback there. So once you start doing something and you start getting feedback, you are in the process, and that is the most important thing to actually accomplish at anything in your life. Start doing it. That's the second piece of advice.
No, I think that's really good. I think that's one of the things that, when you go back to fear, I think fear cripples a lot of us. And, we get comfortable doing what we're doing. And that's one of the lessons I'm trying to teach my kids right now is that you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And, whether that's going and asking, for something that, like I go back to my daughter, she plays softball and she was on a new team this past year. She moved up in the age group and she had pitched before, but this year she didn't. They had a pitcher on the team. And I said, well, you need to go ask your coach if you can warm up pitching or something. And she's like, I'm scared, because her coach just put her at shortstop. It didn't really kind of, and I was like, you should go ask, you should go ask, you should go ask. And then finally she did it. And she didn't want to do it because it was uncomfortable. But, once she did it, then the coach put her in, she pitched, she had a great game. And it's one of those things where like, see, sometimes you have to step out of your comfort zone to get, to just show that you are able to do those things,
Yeah, if there is no pain, there is no gain. That's the same principle. Absolutely. I actually teach my kids the same way. When there is something that you're afraid of, you have to go and do it. Obviously, we're not talking about, jumping off the 20th floor, but if the fear is the only important thing to tell you, hey, I'm doing something that new, something that I'm not accustomed to. But it doesn't really mean that I cannot do it or, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if you find something that you're afraid of doing, that's probably the way you need to go. There's a book called the War of Art where he talks about the resistance, and I can't remember who wrote it, but anyway, that book they talked about like whatever the thing is that's you're most fearful for doing is probably the thing that you need to be doing the most. It's the thing that you need to be driving towards.
And the good thing about this is that you're going to get so much fun when you accomplish something. Even if you accomplish a tiny little thing, but you were afraid to go and do it, once you've done it, you will feel so much growth. It's like when you were 3 years old and you didn't know how to write, and all of a sudden you know how to write. Well, you didn't know how to run, and all of a sudden you know how to run. It's going to be just the same. It's like pure adrenaline.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're 100% right. This has been a great conversation. How can people connect with you, Alex, and learn more about the things that you guys are doing and connect with you online?
Yeah, sure. If anybody is feeling like, you want to continue conversation or if you're a startup that is looking to scale a team, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Alex Svinov, ALEXSVINOV, and I'm more than happy to answer there.
All right, awesome. And I'll link that up in the show notes too at geekleader.com so people can click through there as well. Thanks so much, Alex.
Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.